We have so many stories in our lives, but our stories are not always heard. On the Hear My True Story podcast, we tell our own true stories.
Before the white car parked, our head teacher had scattered. Looking at him, I could only see his tie that was flying backwards, waving at us, and he disappeared in thin air.
I want to share my life story. I want to share my voice with the people because I know that just a small joke I can tell through this podcast, it will make someone smile.
When you ask me what I fear most in life, I would definitely respond to you and say it's fear itself.
We are fighting for togetherness. We are fighting for equal rights. We are fighting to end injustice.
You don't have to be a storyteller or writer because, guess what? Life writes the best stories.
Hear my true story.
This is your favorite time of the week with your number one podcast.
Hear my true story.
Yes, our dear listeners, thank you so much for joining us again this week on our wonderful podcast. Hear my true story. It is me, your host, Otako, and I'm really excited to have you again this week. So it is quite a special episode this time where we shall be talking to someone, a guest on the podcast. You'll get to know them, what they do, what is their story, and of course, why exactly they chose to do what they are doing. That's the main thing on our podcast. We share people's stories that have not been heard. Every story is special. That's why we say, hear my true story. Yes, before I start, I want to say, our dear listeners, we are really happy this week. We shall be having a number of episodes going out on the same guest, and we shall be listening to the stories from part 1, part 2, until part 3. And I hope you enjoy the conversation.
This week's special guest on your favorite podcast.
Hear my true story.
Our dear guest, welcome to Hear My True Story podcast. I would like to ask you maybe to introduce yourself to the listeners so that they get to know who is behind the microphone, who is the person speaking behind the computer. Thank you so much for having you.
Hey, thank you so much. My name is Adnan Senkumba. I am a Ugandan and a producer, an audio producer for podcasts. And I also do sound design for movies in Uganda. I have created, I have designed and recorded so many movies in Uganda, including The Girl in Yellow Jumper, 16 Rounds. Most of those famous Ugandan movies, I have worked on them. I have been working on a couple of series, including Sanyu series, and so many other projects that I can't mention.
Well, thank you so much for that quick summary introduction. I know you have done a lot of things with sound. Are you a sound engineer or you a sound producer? I don't know how to define you. How should I call you for the listeners to know exactly?
All right. In the beginning, I started as a location sound mixer, and a boom swinger. That is what I used to do. And as years went on, I started doing other things in sound. I started designing sound for games. I started designing sound for adverts. I started designing sound for film. And recently, I started recording also podcasts, producing podcasts. And I'm one of the podcast producers in Uganda.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. I'm really happy to have a conversation with the podcaster and also at the same time a sound producer, audio producer, or how do I say, sound engineer?
Sound engineer.
Yes, speaking with the sound engineer based in Uganda. Yeah. For our dear listeners, for those who are listening, Uganda is a country found in East Africa. That is in Africa. Africa is a big continent. And then right now we are just speaking to one person who's doing sound engineering in East Africa, in Uganda, in Africa, to be clear.
In Africa.
Yes,
Yeah.
for those to know. So, Adnan, what is your story? How did you end up being what you are, being a sound engineer? What was this? What's the story behind you being a sound engineer in Uganda?
Okay. I started way back in 2010, I think. It was 2010. So in 2010, I was studying at Makerere University at the Department of Film and Drama. So as I was as you study, we study a lot of things in Uganda. We don't specify that you are doing engineering or you're doing sound or you're doing this. So in the beginning, I started as an actor. Uh, you study course units about acting, and then you go into acting for some good time, like 6 months, a year. You're trying to discover who you are, trying to discover what you're doing. And then as we went to year two, things started changing. We were introduced to film, and then I got interested in doing sound for film. So I started as a boom swinger on the Makerere projects, the ones for the school projects. I started there. I recorded sound for most of the films, of all the films that were done at the department by that time in 2011, 2010 there. I recorded all the sound. So that time I didn't know that I was even doing sound recording. I never understood the concept. I just did recording of the sound, and I didn't know what I was doing. But with time, people started recommending me for jobs. But there was also another person called Andrew Kabugo. Andrew Kabugo had he's a service provider for music even up to today. So he used to have a PS system, and he looked for someone to manage that PS system. So I had to step in and manage that PS system for some good time. So as I managed that PA system, I started learning how to wire the wiring of the whole system, how crossovers work, how speakers work, and I got interested in doing sound. I started doing some DJ work, lots of things are in that. So everyone referred to me as a sound guy, that guy who holds a boom mic, that guy who holds. So I started doing those things there, and here I am today working as a sound engineer in Uganda.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is really a long story, and I'm sure that you just summarized a bit of it. Yeah, for our dear listeners to get to know, Makerere University is one of the biggest universities in Africa, and it is ranked, I think, the 13th.
Number three
right now.
Number three
of the best universities in Africa. Yeah, so if you travel to Uganda, you'll definitely get to know Makerere University, and the Department of Film and Performing is right now film and performing arts.
Performing arts.
Yeah.
Performing arts and film.
Yeah, it's performing arts and film. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where you studied film. And
yes, that's where I studied.
Wow. So this is really interesting. So then you choose to move away from sound for music and DJing, and then you focus on film to give them sound. Why did you choose
The
exactly
transition,
not another?
making a transition from being a DJ or managing PA systems was that I was so tired of sleeping in the morning. Like during the day you're sleeping, and in the night you are working. And sometimes you could work 2 days without sleeping because most of the events happen in the night, and some clients want you to play music up to morning. Some would be even giving you more money to keep playing, even if you had in an agreement that you are going to play from this time to this time. But because you need more money, you could play from that time, from the agreed time up to the following day. So looking at my health and uh, everything, I felt like I'm getting tired, and I stopped doing the DJ stuff. But also, I there was a gap in the film industry. There are no people who are doing sound for film.
Okay.
So whenever we had events, and those events had people recording sound onto camera, it was so difficult for these people to figure out a way of routing the sound into the camera and getting back into the mixer, all those things. So I started researching about film and sound for film. Um, Having that background that at school I was a boom swinger and a recordist for film. It was not so hard for me to transit from DJing or managing PA systems into sound mixing for film and recording for film. So all that is how I transited from managing music or managing PA systems into location sound mixing.
Okay, then there I get the story how you ended up into
Yeah.
film. So now, I know because of time, I need to really ask to be clear onto the point. You talked about film and film. Oh, I mean, maybe there is a listener there who doesn't know what is the film industry in Uganda. The general picture of the film industry in Uganda. How is it?
Yeah, the film industry in Uganda has is just is very young. It was already there, like in the 80s, but not so serious. And it got so serious in 2000, early 2000, 1999, there, when the Nigerian film industry had started also becoming big. So Ugandans also started making films here and there. And in 2000, that's when we saw a very big uh, uh, how can I say that? A
Film
blow.
industry.
Eh?
Like,
Yeah, the industry started growing so big.
mm,
But that time we didn't have these very high tech cameras, and during that time, uh, from the stories I've heard in the seniors in the industry, they said they used to have those big Betacam cameras, and these are the things they used to record. So during that time, we had like a few dramas, such as Chigenya Genya. That was 2004.
yeah,
Chigenya Genya
Chigenya Agenya is one of like
2004.
the famous Ugandan
Yes,
film
Ugandan series,
series.
television series. Yes,
Okay.
and it was recorded in local language. So we had also Center 4, which was in English, but also recorded by the same people. And it was also a television drama that
Mm.
ran like 13 or 16 episodes. These were like the foundation of what we call now an industry in Uganda right now. So right now we are like in the third phase of the industry where DSTV has come in. Lots of productions are going on. DSTV is one of the biggest content buyers in Africa, and it has its headquarters in South Africa. So it buys content from Ugandans and it showcases it onto their VOD, which is called Showmax. And uh, Showmax, you can access it, I think, around the world. I hear most of the people in the diaspora watch Ugandan content from Showmax. And from during COVID, that was 2020. From 2020 up to now, the film industry has blown up. Things changed for the film industry. People had nothing to do but only to consume content. So we have seen a very big growth since 2020. We have seen a very huge growth of the film industry of Uganda. Uh, up to date, where investors have started injecting a lot of money into it.
Mm,
Yeah,
I
so
get that.
basically, what I can say, that's the brief background about the industry in Uganda. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's things have become better and better, becoming better and better each year.
Enjoying this episode? Leave a review now.
Hear my true story.
Okay. So, I mean, for our dear listeners, for our guest mentioned about DSTV, that is like a digital state-lit television. It is from South Africa, if I'm not wrong. Is it
Yeah,
South
it is
Africa
from
or
South Africa.
yeah, owned by Mild Choice. So it is one of like the big content buyers in East Africa. Yeah, I don't know.
Actually, in Africa.
In Africa too.
It's in Africa, yeah. It's the hugest content buyer
In Africa.
in Africa, yeah.
And then where does
It
it
has
live?
played a very big role in the development of Nigerian film industry, and it is impacting. It is right now impacting the Ugandan film industry because it did the same in Kenya, it did the same in Nigeria, it is doing the same in Ghana, and Uganda right now. So everything like they're injecting in a lot of money to produce content for Ugandans and the rest of Africa, and also to the rest of the world.
African stories. I mean, it's
Yeah,
more
African
like
stories.
Africans are able to tell their own stories. So the
That's
platform
true.
pushes for that. I mean, that's good. I mean, I know DSTV because I lived in Uganda. I grew up in Uganda. I know it's one of the popular content buyer. At the same time, I don't know where this leaves other content buyers. Like this so common. People know about Netflix, where you watch and you rarely find African content that is really pushing African stories. I don't know whether you guys there also feel the same as filmmakers about Netflix.
Yeah, as a filmmaker, it's I would say I understand the way, maybe the dynamics of filmmaking and the numbers, the issue of numbers, because if we have uh, like 40,000 people subscribing every month to Netflix in Kampala, that's a very small number. So you can understand their way of working because they follow numbers. If you compare the people who consume content from Netflix in Uganda and the people who consume content from Netflix in Nigeria, the numbers are very different. And if they choose to inject more money in Nigeria than in Uganda, it is understandable because there are very few people who are consuming um, content from Netflix in Uganda than in Nigeria. So if you see a lot of Nigerian movies, just know that the Nigerians are consuming more content on Netflix than in Uganda. Actually, if you follow the trend, Nigeria has they have Amazon Prime is already in Nigeria. It has headquarters there. They have Netflix. They have Apple TV. All these VODs have already started commissioning people to do films in Nigeria, but not in Uganda, because we still have a very small number. But here, the good thing is we have, even if the numbers are small, every house can afford to have a DSTV, a
Okay.
digital satellite TV. So from the little subscription fee that comes from DSTV, you can watch football, you can watch movies, you can watch a lot of things from that package that you pay for, which is close like 30 euros. Very, very little money. And when you compare when you compare the value of Netflix, where you're just going to watch movies without, because in Africa most of the people watch news, people watch politics, and Netflix doesn't have all those like shows. Yet DSTV has, if you want current affairs, you will have a channel for that. If you want political shows, you will have a channel for that. If you want news, you will have a channel for that. Netflix is only focused on movies uh,
Yeah.
and series, and
Yeah, I
no
get that.
football. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
understand the point of numbers. So the capitalism is all about numbers. Where are the
that's
consumers?
true.
Where are the people taking a lot? And that's why you find
Yeah.
that there's less content from East Africa, just because of the numbers compared to other parts of Africa, where there are big numbers on such certain platforms like Netflix, maybe Amazon TV or Apple TV. All these, yeah, I can get that. But I mean, like, how is there is, where they say telling our own stories. How is this in East Africa? How is the movement of like Africans tell their own stories?
Yeah, the movement of us telling our own stories has grown dramatically, like it has skyrocketed. We can see a lot of people trying to tell stories in our local languages, which was not the case 5 years ago. uh, More people are telling stories in our language. More people are telling stories that are not copycats of the Hollywood movies, because we also had that problems 5 years ago, where a person can copy the same movie from the Western world, same movie, same dialogue, everything, and uh, gives it another name and sell it on DVD. Today, these things are changing. People are proud of telling our own stories. People are proud of uh, telling stories that are in our language. Our languages are showcased also, which is good. Which I feel like it's a very huge movement, and going forward, we shall see more Luganda movies even sometime. I think in the coming years we shall see Luganda movies going for Oscar, because we have an Oscar nominated film already for international category called Tembele, because it's in Luganda. It shows you where we're going. It's in Luganda. It's mixed Luganda, Runyankore, Swahili. So Luganda is the language spoken in the central region of Uganda, and Runyankore is spoken in the western region of Uganda. Swahili is like spoken around East Africa, so Kenya, Tanzania, So it has all the languages, and it's for all audiences. So it was nominated for Oscars, and it happened to be one of those films that were they are in the international category.
Okay.
So
I mean,
that shows you that the movement is growing and it's big.
I mean, I like the fact that there's language is being pushed through creative arts like film and music. Right now it's also coming to podcasting, where language is being pushed, and I can really understand how difficult it was for people to break through with the language because of colonialism, where the English language was promoted in Africa, where people were forced to drop their local languages, to drop their mother languages, and they take up the colonialist languages like English, like German, like French, like the Dutch people, like Portuguese, where people were pushed to speak these languages of colonialists, and they drop their own language. And that also goes into books, where there's a lot of books written in English and less books are written in the local languages. So stories are not told by the people themselves in the language they understand. But for the film industry, I'm really excited to see this changing.
Enjoying this episode? Leave a review now.
Hear my true story.
Okay. I mean, I like the fact that there's that emphasis on language, because if our languages are not told by us in the stories that we tell, then the languages will get lost. That's one.
That's true.
Yeah. Another thing I want to maybe to give a general picture for the people who are listening, those who are not Ugandans, those who are not Africans maybe, who are living in Uganda and East Africa, is that Uganda, particularly as a country, it has over 70 spoken languages, over 70 languages that are spoken in Uganda by Ugandans. So you imagine a country that has over 70 languages, and Luganda is one of the major languages that is spoken in central Uganda, and it's also spoken in East Africa. And you get to hear people speak it. And then you find Swahili, which is an East African language, which is also spoken by East African people. Your dear listeners, we cannot continue beyond now. And for that reason, I would like to say, join us in the next episode of this same conversation. I'd like to say bye for now.
We not only have voices for a podcast, but also faces for YouTube. Don't miss your next episode. Hear my true story.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Music by Edwin Matovo, hosted and produced by Otako. Subscribe to our podcast for more stories and visit us on our website, hearmytruestory.com, for more stories. All the links are listed in the show notes of this podcast.